clear of the closing doors, please.
All right, here we go. Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to SST on Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, or on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. If you like the show, hit the subscribe button, notifications bell on YouTube as well, so you know when we post the new content. Because right now we got some good content to talk to you about. Because football season, as this is released on Tuesday the 23rd, 16 days away from opening night of the 2022 NFL season. How could you not be excited? The preseason's halfway done, give or take. It's about to be wrapped up, and we're doing our fantasy drafts, and we're getting jacked up. So let's talk about some football. Today on the agenda, it's just me, and we're going to talk about the 5 big NFL questions I have going into this year. Some are simple, and you expect. Some are a little more interesting. And, of course, we got some Giants-Jets question at the end there too, to just fill that appetite for us New York football fans. Because us New York football fans, we got to look at the NFL at large a little bit when we're talking about winners, but we still care about our teams. And we do know that this year is really important for both the Jets and Giants. For the Jets, obviously, with Zach Wilson getting healthy, seeing if he takes steps in the right directions and how much longer they might stick with him at quarterback if he could solidify himself as a franchise guy. Daniel Jones, a couple years into the future already on that front. This is the last shot for Daniel Jones. Unless he can put points on the board, can score touchdowns, he's done, right? You can't throw 20-plus touchdowns as a rookie and then go for 11 and 10 touchdowns in your second and third year. That ain't going to fly. If he don't eclipse 24, 25, I don't even want to have a conversation about it because that is not going to cut it. So we'll get to the Giants and Jets later. But first off, let's start with our big question number 1. It's a question that you kind of have to ask. And this year, it might be a little simple, and I think that's okay. So first question, who is the true number 1 contender in the NFL in 2022? So when you think about true NFL contender, that means to win the Super Bowl, right? So we're not talking about a team that's going to be a lock to make the playoffs if we don't have playoff expectations. And the way this one is really shaping out here, it's almost an easy answer because you have some teams around the number 1 odds to win the Super Bowl with serious question marks, if you ask me. But if you go to that number 1 team, the Buffalo Bills, I think it is very easy to believe and understand that this is the team to beat in the NFL. And here's why. They were knocking at the door last year. Josh Allen had another amazing season. He seems to be getting better and better. The only negative you can really add to this team is that they lost their offensive coordinator in Brian Daboll, but otherwise they play in a very manageable division. The Patriots will be decent. The Dolphins should be decent. The Jets will not be very good, but they're very manageable. They should win a lot of division games, and their schedule, it stretches out to be somewhere in that middle range. We'll get to that in a second. But at plus 550 odds, clearly the best odds in the league. That says something about the story, right? I think that could even be a little bit better. I think plus 550 is reasonable for them because you think about the next couple teams. Look at that right there. If you're watching on YouTube, you got the Bills at plus 550. After that, the Buccaneers at plus 750, Packers plus 900, Chiefs plus 1,000, onto the Rams, Chargers, Niners, Broncos, etc. Think about those other teams right now. Tom Brady is another year older who just showed up to camp. His roster is older, getting banged up on the offensive line. No more Rob Gronkowski. Mike Evans a year older. Godwin off an ACL injury. Leonard Fournette looking pretty good, but he's not going to carry the offense. The Bucs shouldn't be number 2 here, but the respect of Tom Brady, a respect of a team that has been in it to win it 2 years in a row now and won it 2 years ago. I get why they're towards the top of this list, but it doesn't make me feel inspired about the second best team in the league. The Green Bay Packers, a very similar situation. They lose their number 1 receiver in Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers, another year older, off multiple MVPs in a row at this point. The defense is decent. The offense, we'll see. They lost some O-line help a little bit there as well. And if you think about the core that we got so used to just putting up points every single week in Green Bay, that core is not quite there. Say what you want about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's not that special, but he was another guy Aaron Rodgers trusted. Aaron Jones is still there. and AJ Dillon's still there. But is this team really going to be a fully run committed team that's going to run the ball down people's throats and win games with defense and ball control? I don't see that happening, but I don't see a path for Aaron Rodgers to get even close to another MVP caliber season. So do you feel good about them being ranked the third best odds to win the Super Bowl? I don't. Plus 900. Move on to the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 1,000. You're always going to have the Chiefs in the top 5 Super Bowl odds as long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, and especially if Andy Reid is the head coach. But we know it's been talked about over and over again of the loss of Tyreek Hill. They still got Travis Kelce. They bring in Juju Smith-Schuster. They get Sky Moore, the rookie receiver. They're hoping something for. But is it going to be the same spark, the same just in-your-face, nonstop point scoring juggernaut that the Chiefs have been in Patrick Mahomes' tenure? It's hard to comprehend how that's going to take place with their running game being pretty meh to non-existent at times, their defense being absolutely a liability at different times of last year, and their offense really ebbing and flowing their way to being that top 10, top 5 level offense that they are known to be. They weren't that last year for a good chunk. So a lot of talk about defenses figuring out Mahomes. I'm not going to buy into that, but you combine some of that with the lack of talent or the loss of talent for the Chiefs, and I don't feel great about them being number 4 here either. The Rams are Super Bowl defending champions here at plus 1,200, the 5th best odds. We know what it takes to repeat in the NFL. It happens so infrequently. Even the best teams in the history struggle to win more than one Super Bowl in a row. A lot of times you'll see a Patriots situation. They won a couple in a couple years, right? So do you expect the Rams to truly be that number 1 contender again? With Stafford always going to be playing through injuries, you know how he does it. McVay and that team will be good. I trust them to make the playoffs, to be a good team, etc. But I'm not looking at them as number 1 contender because I can't even trust them to be the best team in their division this year with the 49ers and Shanahan and Trey Lance, as well as Kyler Murray and the Cardinals possibly hanging around and taking a step up, despite that feeling unlikely as well. So out of those top 5 or 6 teams, like I'm not feeling that strong. And the Chargers, who are number 6 here at plus 1,400, they have to do it. It comes to a point where, yes, Herbert is electric. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, great. Eckler's still very good. The defense is talented out the ass. I get it. I love the Chargers. It's easy to want to root for the Chargers. However, I ain't calling them a number 1 contender until they're 10-2 rolling their way through the league. Because you got to do it. Seeing is believing in the NFL. And until they get there, I can predict all I want. I would be lying to you if I said I was confident the Chargers can be better than the Buffalo Bills, especially since the Chargers have one of the hardest schedules in the entire NFL. We'll take a sneak peek at that little list here based off Sharp Football Analysis. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can look along, but I'll explain it for you guys. The AFC West is a juggernaut. We know it. Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, Broncos. Guess who has the 3 hardest schedules in the league? Raiders, Chargers, Chiefs. Broncos somehow escaped to somewhere a little closer to the middle of the pack. But that's tough. And when you think about the Buffalo Bills having a very middle of the pack schedule with a division much more manageable than the AFC West, I cannot trust with any semblance of faith that the Chargers are going to be a bigger contender than Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So there's question number 1. Is it by default? A little bit. It's a little bit by default, but that's okay because when you have nits to pick with all these other teams across the board, and you have no nits to pick really with the Buffalo Bills outside of losing their OC, but retaining the quarterback who made all this realistic and made this all possible, I'm rolling with the Bills all day in that conversation when literally, as I just went through, the next 5 teams have big question marks, big time changes, big time losses from talent perspective on their rosters. So the Bills are projected to be the number 1 contender, and I say they will be the number 1 contender. So let's go on to our second big question of the NFL this season and talk about sleepers. Everyone loves sleepers. We all love talking about sleepers and what they can do going into the playoffs and possibly being a Super Bowl contender, etc. 9 times out of 10, every person you know who says, you know who I really like this year? The Lions. You seen Dan Campbell on Hard Knocks? Yeah, sick football guy. Yeah, I love it too. Dan Campbell is awesome. I think the Lions will be better, but they ain't a sleeper. What are they going to do? Win 7 games this year? It'll be awesome if they did, but they're not winning 10. They're not getting to the top of the NFC North. That ain't happening, right? So, where do you want to go when you're even talking about a sleeper in general? I tried to do a little bit of a threshold here where I looked at playoff odds. I wanted them to be a little bit closer to even or plus odds, but it's really tough. Like all the teams that have plus odds to make the playoffs have that for a reason, right? So the Jets and the Giants right here, they're plus odds to make the playoffs because they stink. And it's probably not likely for them to make a run higher than 7 wins. So I went a little bit different. I combined a threshold with, the regular season win totals along with playoff odds, along with Super Bowl odds, because you got to talk about all of that to find what it is to be a true sleeper. All right. So I'm going to go with a team that is getting some hype. So it makes them a little less sleepy because people are saying this out loud, but I'm going to stick with it. They're still projected to not win their division. They have just below even odds. So just in the minus 150 range to make the playoffs. And they have a new offensive coordinator, new head coach in town, and a quarterback who we love to make fun of. It's Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you've been watching Subway Sports Talk, either here on the podcast or on YouTube or on Instagram and TikTok with the picks that I make and Pat Boyle make week to week, you know how much I loved betting on the Vikings last year in certain spots. I was relatively successful in doing so, even though they ended up being about even in their against the spread record last year. But all the things that we complained about over and over again with the Minnesota Vikings, where's the aggression? Where is the foot on the gas, the throat, just pushing your opponent down to the ground and winning games? It always felt like they were playing tight games into the fourth quarter. It always felt like they were not taking advantage of their advantages. And it was in part because of their offensive scheme. It was part because of Mike Zimmer being a little bit more conservative of a head coach. And also, obviously, in part because of Kirk Cousins and how much people can trust him to actually make the big play, to make the extended play, and not just take a check down or take a 5 yard out on a 3rd and 11. It's something that's been frustrating with him for years, but you have to ask yourself, is that Kirk Cousins true, or is that the whole system that has been put in place in Minnesota around him? I say it's a little bit of both, but there has been a lot of reason to see Kirk Cousins taking that step and just ripping the band-aid off and letting it fly a little bit. And this is the year to do it. We know we got the Rams coach in Minnesota now. There's going to be a more balanced scheme, a little more passing, a little more down the field action, and they have the weapons to do it. Everyone talks about Justin Jefferson. That dude's an absolute stud. If I did a big question on who would have the best receiver season in 2022, it'd be hard to not pick him based off Devontae Adams leaving Green Bay, going to Oakland, or I'm sorry, Las Vegas, and Cooper Kupp just likely to have some sort of regression in the negative sense that he can't get that many targets and that many catches and that many touchdowns again. I might be wrong, but Justin Jefferson is poised for an enormous, enormous season. Don't forget that Adam Thielen is a red zone dynamo. He gets in the end zone with the best of them in fantasy purposes. He ended up being way higher ranked than you would have ever thought because of that touchdown efficiency. And you know Kirk likes to find him there. If he can stay healthy, that's such a dynamic receiver threat that you can't really top it, especially now in that division. The Bears are terrible. The Lions are okay. They'll be feisty. The Packers are expected to win that division by a decent chunk, but we have question marks we just talked about with the Green Bay Packers, and they're serious. They're real. It's going to be very different watching Aaron Rodgers play without a Devontae Adams, without even a number 3 in Valdez Scantling. Is Lazard and the rookie Watson going to be able to steady that ship from the passing attack? Is Aaron Jones going to get 150 targets this year? I don't know. If you have him in fantasy, you're hoping for it. But right now, I love the Minnesota Vikings. They are at plus 3,500 to win the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, listen, sleepers are not meant to win the Super Bowl. They're meant to make some noise. They're meant to make a splash. And that's why I am going with the Vikings here as my sleeper because, as much as they're expected to be competitive, they're not expected to win the division. They're only minus 115 to make the playoffs. And uh, they're just always looked at as a meddling franchise with a meddling quarterback. and a team that always leaves something to be desired for. But this might be their time to strike. They are currently plus 260 to win the NFC North. Packers minus 190, which is a decent chunk. For reference there, like some of the better teams in the league are hardly better than that, right? The Bills are minus 230 to win their division. Packers minus 190. The Packers are still have a top three over under in the league this year as far as win totals. Buccaneers minus 250. So that qualifies the Vikings as a sleeper to me. They still have Dalvin Cook. They still have Alexander Madison to back up Dalvin Cook. And they got a Kirk Cousins with a new staff and hopefully some new empowerment, ready to take some risks and make some exciting things happen. If you have Justin Jefferson in your fantasy league this year, shout out to you. He'll likely go absolutely off. Let's move on to our third question of the 2022 NFL season and talk about who will win the MVP in 2022. MVP is a very hard thing to predict, and it has been a quarterback, obviously, every single year, basically, over the past however many years. It's been a long time. So we know we had the Cooper Kupp flirtation last year. We had the Jonathan Taylor flirtation last year. But let's be real. If you're trying to win money betting on the NFL MVP, you have to look at every single quarterback in the league, or at least the top half of quarterbacks, because there is a history here where some quarterbacks can take massive leaps. So we're going to talk about three options here. We're going to talk about a sound option, which is a nice bet that's not too crazy. We're going to talk about a medium range option, and we're going to talk about a long shot option. So let's start with the top tier here. And I think the obvious answer is Justin Herbert. Now, obviously, if you want to go Josh Allen plus 650, I'm all for it, right? Plus 650, you can still get a good return, even though it's the lowest odds in the entire league. But if they're going to be the best team, they're going to win 13 wins. There's just a great chance that he will be the MVP, especially if he runs in some touchdowns and throws 35 to 40 as well. That's just a matter of fact. But let's go to Justin Herbert here. He's taken a little leap each of his first 2 years. Last year, even better. He has the electric throws. He has the mobility to throw on the run. He has the threats on his offense to make huge plays. I think it's going to be a very fun offense to watch. Their schedule makes it really tough because I talked about it before, talking about number one contenders. In order for Justin Herbert to win the MVP, the Chargers have to have 12 plus wins. That's just what it is. If they're not winning their division, if they're trailing to Patrick Mahomes or the Raiders or even the Denver Broncos, which is another thing we can talk about in a little bit here, like, he ain't winning the MVP. I don't care what his numbers look like. If they're losing close games, if they're going for it on fourth down and not getting it, I don't care if it's his fault or Staley's fault. He ain't winning the MVP, but I still love the upside plus 900, a guy with the electric factor of throwing bombs, throwing missiles, and hitting all his receivers in all their spots and putting up silly numbers. If that team wins games, he'll be a very likely candidate to win MVP. If they're 8-2, 10-3, something in that range here with a chance to win 13 games, his odds will not be 900 anymore. He'll probably be in the 400 range or less, of course, unless Josh Allen and the Bills are doing very similarly up in Buffalo. So let's take off Justin Herbert here and talk about another middle range option. I want to say Lamar Jackson. I really, really do. I want to say Lamar as that mid-range option to win MVP, but it is hard to win too. It's hard to get a second one. And I think with the receiver talent that they didn't add in Baltimore, that they didn't bring to the table to help out their star quarterback, I don't want to say franchise because they haven't paid the man yet, but they didn't give him the options he needed. However, I do think he will never run for 0 touchdowns again as long as he plays more than freaking 6 games in the NFL season again. He ran for none last year. The regression for that is positive. He will run some touchdowns in. He will get close. I think they have to run away with the AFC North in order for that. So I'm not going to pick him as my mid-range option. Instead, I'm going to go to a guy in the AFC West, and it's Derek Carr. He's flirted once before. He's been in the MVP conversation once before in his life. And if he will ever do it again, how would it not be this year? Just think about the options he has to throw to. His top 3 options alone. Devontae Adams, perhaps the best wide receiver in the NFL. Hunter Renfrow, perhaps the best slot wide receiver in the NFL, if not top 4 at the job. And then Darren Waller, a top 5 tight end who's an absolute stud, vertically in between the numbers, the whole 9. So if there's a year for the Raiders and Derek Carr to make some noise, it's this year. And he's got to do it. Because if he falls on his face and he's throwing picks or he's throwing checkdowns and he's not giving some of his guys a chance to make big plays and pushing the ball downfield, it'll be a huge failure in Las Vegas. That's not what I expect to happen. Now, Josh McDaniels, as the new coach over there in Las Vegas, it makes me a little bit nervous, if I had to be completely honest, because we all know what he's done in New England. We all know what he's done with Tom Brady. However, there's only a few little tidbits of seasons and data to look at that don't include Tom Brady, one in which includes Mac Jones last year. And that was a much more managerial style of offense. And that's not a knock on McDaniels. It's not a knock on Mac Jones. It's not a knock on Belichick or the Patriots for that matter. That was their best option to win last year, was to run the ball down people's throats when Harris or Stevenson were cooking. So were the Patriots. And Mac Jones really took off after that run game was established. And then they let him get a little bit more comfortable with the offense. But you never watched them and said, yeah, they're pushing the ball. They're making big plays. They're putting up crooked numbers in quarters. That's not how it really worked in New England. And it never did. Even for a lot of the years with Tom Brady, that's just not how it worked. It was sustainable drives. It was Tom Brady and McDaniels orchestrating that offense together. And otherwise, it's Matt Castle. It's a weird Denver stint. And it's not much for Josh McDaniels. So do you trust him? I think if he doesn't take chances, if he's not taking big shots down the field to those 3 guys that I mentioned, plus some others, what are you doing? Why are you even there? Why are you taking your quarterback and ripping away all of his freedom, all of his power? Because Derek Carr throws a freaking good deep ball. And if Devontae Adams ain't getting the targets, if he ain't getting the red zone targets, if Waller ain't getting the targets, what are we doing? You got playmakers, let them make plays. Derek Carr is a very solid option, plus 2,800, a little bit of a long shot, but not the biggest long shot, if you ask me. Because here's the big long shot. Here's the big one. There has been some quarterbacks in their second years to make serious runs at the MVP and serious runs at playoff berths and Super Bowl berths and Super Bowl titles. If you don't know where I'm going with Trey Lance at plus 4,000. It sounds insane. The guy's thrown like freaking 100 passes in the last 3 years of playing football, and he didn't look great doing it last year. However, you look at this team, you understand what Kyle Shanahan has done in the past, and you see a guy who can put up some silly numbers. If he throws for some touchdowns, runs for some touchdowns, he can be one of those guys like Lamar Jackson in year 2, like Carson Wentz in year 2, who take the league by storm. And by week 12, we're saying, holy smokes, is this guy the MVP? Is Trey Lance the MVP? All of a sudden in week 12, he's got 8 rushing touchdowns and 26 throwing touchdowns. And you're like, whoa, where did this come from? The Niners are killing it. And it's because Trey Lance is making big time plays. It was not easy, I imagine, to rip the Band-Aid off of Jimmy Garoppolo, but they did it this year, pretty much without hesitation. But when you have a guy who's won so many games for you in the last 3 years, who's made it to the Super Bowls, who's made it through playoff run after playoff run when he's healthy, to just go to a quarterback who looked pretty bad his rookie year, that means something coming from a guy in Kyle Shanahan who's put up awesome offenses, even with some terrible quarterbacks. So if he finds that balance, if Trey Lance can be the playmaker so many people think he is, if he can connect on deep balls to Ayuk and to Deebo Samuel, and he can keep the offense moving in those situations, we could blink and the statistics for Trey Lance can be off the charts. So I think plus 4,000 for Trey is a long shot. Obviously, that's why it's plus 4,000. But if you're looking for that diamond in the rough, needle in the haystack, I don't know, pick your cliche, and you might be finding Trey Lance with some good MVP odds going into the year. Who knows? He gets his odds down to plus 600, plus 800 from plus 4,000. You might be cashing out for double your money anyway, even if he doesn't win the MVP. I'm not putting much on this, but I'll sprinkle something and see if we get a taste with Trey Lance. All right. Question number 4. big NFL questions of 2022. Here's question number 4. It's a question that's been asked before. Last year, it was perhaps for their counterpart. This year, it's being asked again. Can 4 AFC West teams make the playoffs? Can 4 teams in any division realistically make the playoffs? It's a hard proposition. It is. It's something that I actually don't know how many times it's happened in the NFL. Actually, it's probably never happened because they just added the wild card. So it's definitely never happened before. So there's definitely been 3 in the past. But there's been this question, can 4 teams from the same division make it? If you look at this NFL right now and you think about the possibilities of those teams doing so, you look through the AFC East and you say Jets, no way, right? They're not doing it. The Patriots and Dolphins have a slight chance. We'll see, but that ain't happening. AFC North, if the Steelers were still the Steelers, maybe they still will be the Steelers. Who knows if it's Pickett or if it's Trubisky. Mike Tomlin seems to win games every year. It's possible. The Browns with Deshaun Watson and his suspension, we'll see what they can do to hold up. It's possible. Bengals and Ravens are likely to make the playoffs. So that's 2. That's not going to happen. AFC South. Next question. that ain't happening. Texans? No. Jaguars? Maybe. Probably not. Titans and Colts? Maybe. Probably not. Okay. NFC. The NFC East, you get the Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders. Listen, we know the NFC East. I don't care that they got the easiest schedule. The Giants got the easiest. The Eagles got the second easiest. The Commanders and the Cowboys got easier schedules than most. We know how the NFC East work. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. NFC North, Bears. See ya next time. Next question. NFC South, no way. Falcons, Panthers, no way. Saints and Bucks. I actually like the Saints this year. NFC West, would have been possible if the Seahawks were still the Seahawks, but guess what? They ain't. They got Geno Smith and Drew Lock as their quarterback. And people aren't that high on the Cardinals right now. Perhaps some good time to get some value on the Arizona Cardinals, but that ain't happening. So that leaves us with the AFC West. That leaves us with 4 teams with really good quarterbacks and a lot of talent. Whole lot of talent. A lot of playmakers. If you had a bet off the jump, who is making the playoffs out of those teams, out of that unit, you're probably going to say that most likely to not make the playoffs would be the Raiders and the Broncos. However, we just talked about Derek Carr and his chance to make an MVP caliber season and to make splashes this year. And we talked about all the talent they have around him. We talked about a defense that was pretty damn good last year. Got after the passer pretty damn well. Max Crosby, what a player, amongst others. Talk about the Denver Broncos. They've been knocking around. They've been at the door. They've been getting bounced to the back of the line from the bouncer the past couple of years without a quarterback, not really knowing what to do with themselves. They got 2 talented running backs in Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. They got a really good receiving core with Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. Unfortunately, Tim Patrick got banged up. We'll see what happens there. But they're a good team, and they got Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson, over the past 5 years of his career, has basically been a walking playoff berth. Last year aside, because of the injury, he missed a couple games. They still ended up with 7 wins. He's basically been a walking playoff berth for a lot of his career. So what does that mean now? You got the Broncos and the Raiders with a little bit less of a chance to make the playoffs. You got the Chiefs and the Chargers, 2 teams that are looked to be top 5 teams in the NFL with the quarterbacks, with the coaching, with the talent they have around them. That's a real possibility. So let's talk about this individually first. We'll talk about this one individually because this is the division that sets the mark for the question I'm getting to. Can 4 teams from one division make the playoffs? So for the Chargers, you got minus 200. For the Chiefs, you got minus 210. For the Denver Broncos, you got minus 145, also minus odds there. And last but not least, as I scroll here, I'm sorry, you have the Las Vegas Raiders at plus 150. So the Raiders are the only team here with plus odds to make the playoffs here at plus 150. And that parlay, if you put it all together, I don't know if you can actually do that cannot parlay. It doesn't really matter what it clears here. But if you go to your little specials here and you get any division to have 4 teams in the playoffs, you get plus 1,200 odds. Plus 1,200. That's not too shabby. Now, I did mention one thing earlier that is going to come into play here, and that's the strength of schedule. The Chiefs have the hardest in the league. The Chargers have the second. The Raiders have the third. The Broncos somehow in the same division, playing the same opponents for the most part, those couple that make a big difference, push the Broncos all the way to the middle of the pack with the 17th hardest schedule, right smack in the middle. Can they do it? Can they do it? Here's the question to say if they can do it or not, right? You look at the AFC. If all 4 teams from the AFC West were to make the playoffs, that means the Dolphins, the Patriots, one of the Ravens or the Bengals or the Browns, and the Titans or Colts will not make the playoffs. Assuming the Bills win the AFC East, assuming the Ravens or Bengals win and one of them don't make it as a wild card, assuming the Titans or Colts win and one of them don't make it as a wild card, that's the ticket. I think it's possible. I'm going to sprinkle something on that plus 1,200 because I can't really imagine a world where the Bengals don't make the playoffs, but we know what has happened to teams after making the Super Bowl and not winning the Super Bowl. You make this crazy run, you can argue they shouldn't really have been there last year, right? Like if you really think about who were the best teams in the league last year, it was the Bills and the Chiefs in the AFC. And if the Bills and Chiefs didn't face off against one another in that epic battle, the round before the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, we might be talking about a very different story here. I think it's possible the Bengals don't make it. There's a really big time chance for regression with Jamar Chase. Is he going to have that insane efficiency again this year? It's hard to believe, but even if he doesn't, T. Higgins is the dude. T. Higgins is a beast. Joe Mixon had a very good year last year. And Joe Burrow, man. Joe Burrow is so calm, cool, collected, so solid, always making plays, always with his eyes downfield. It's hard to imagine him not being a walking playoff berth himself. But even though they've gotten a little better on defense, their defense is okay. It's like decent, right? Their offense was actually not even that special last year. It was just really explosive for spurts. Like consistently and looking at like DVOA over the course of the year, they were really closer to average than elite. Do they really make that leap into the elite echelon of offenses this year? Are they going to really be able to roll with a Bills, Chargers, Chiefs, etc. over a 18-week season? It'll be tough because last year they really got in, towards the end of the year. The Ravens were a disaster last year. They lost 3 starting running backs before the season started. Lamar Jackson missed a few games. Their number 1 receiver was still Hollywood Brown. They haven't really gotten better there, but whatever. Like their defense, their secondary was decimated. They had the worst injury luck in the league last year, right? So I see the Ravens as being a much more likely chance to regress up and get back to the top of the AFC North. And that could leave a chance for the Bengals to win 9 or 10 games and possibly not make the playoffs. And that's what you need. You need basically the worst team in the AFC West to get 10 and tiebreakers to work out in the favor. I think it's possible. It's worth a sprinkle. And I think it might happen because realistically, again, Russell Wilson, walking playoff berth in his career. Derek Carr made the playoffs last year on the up and up with more talent at his disposal. The Chiefs and Chargers are looked at as top 5 teams in the NFL for a reason. So there we go. There's your odds. There's your chance at 4 playoff teams from just one division. Last question of the 5 big NFL questions in 2022. Who has a better season, the Jets or the Giants? Who has a less worse season, the Jets or the Giants? That's the real question. It's not who's going to be better, who's going to be less bad. Or maybe being bad might be good for the Giants. If Daniel Jones falls off the face of the earth and starts stinking it up and they're freaking 2-12, sure, being bad might be really good. There's a couple quarterbacks in this next class who are expected to be dudes. Okay. So that's not the question, though. We're not asking who's going to be less worse. We're going to ask who's going to be better, who's going to have a better year. Now, I'm not going to put this out as a simple 1-to-1, record versus record. There's a reason the Giants are projected at 7 wins. There's a reason the Jets are projected at 5.5. There's a world where they both have 6 wins, and you can feel vastly different about one team's season versus the other team's season. So let's talk about some of the less statistical things that make a season a success for franchises in the places of the Jets and Giants. Is one team more likely to know who their quarterback is next year? Yes. And it's the New York Jets and it's Zach Wilson. It's a little bit interesting to hear people in the profession, whether it be past players, whether it be analysts and writers or whoever it may be, talk about Zach Wilson because one guy goes, "Oh my God, this guy has it all. He's got the arm, he's got the talent, he's got the mobility, he can make all the throws. I love him." And the next guy says, "This guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He doesn't know how to play quarterback. Yeah, he only looks good when he breaks down the pocket and gets outside and makes some schoolyard plays. That's the only time he looks good. What does he do on pace? What does he do on his third step or the three-step drop? How often is that working out positively for Zach Wilson? That's the big question mark here. He has some talent around him. I love, love, love Elijah Moore in for a big season, getting overdrafted possibly in fantasy just because you can't really trust the Jets offense too much. But there's a chance we look at Zach Wilson after week 12 and say, you did enough, bro. You get another year to try to become a franchise quarterback because you're looking like you're on your way. Now, Daniel Jones, on the other hand, you can make a lot of arguments. You can make a lot of excuses for Daniel Jones, but I'm kind of sick of doing that. I actually haven't really done it in 2 years. Yeah, he's had two terrible coaches at this point. Joe Judge, not very good. Jason Garrett, even worse. Like Jason Garrett is the worst thing that could have happened to Daniel Jones. You got a guy in Daniel Jones who's naturally a little conservative as a person. He's a little bit loose as a quarterback where he's losing the ball, he's taking risky throws, he's getting hit or he's fumbling or whatever. And you get Jason Garrett who just makes this mellow man in Daniel Jones, give him more mellow and less opportunity to succeed and less things to highlight as far as his skill set and his actual talent. And it was measurable. And like everybody knew. Everybody knew. There are a couple Giants fans out there who were like, Jason Garrett, he did this with Dak Prescott. They had some good offenses over there. Like maybe he'll be all right over here. It's like, yeah, well, they also had the best O-line in the league, elite running back, quarterback who proved something a lot quicker than Daniel Jones and Dak Prescott, a lot more wide receiver talent, better defense. Like it's not the same. It's not 1-to-1. The Cowboys won the games they won in spite of Jason Garrett. They won those games without the push from their offensive-minded head coach to do something special, right? So when Garrett came to freaking offense coordinator of the Giants, we all knew it was terrible. Cowboy fans texted me. My friends said, good luck, man. First game of the year, you drive right down the field, get in the red zone, don't score. Get used to that. That happens a lot with Jason Garrett. Yeah, and it did. That's exactly how it worked out. So, yeah, Daniel Jones, he had a lot of guys or a couple guys who didn't help him out. Yeah, he had a lot of injuries of players who were supposed to help him out who ended up not helping him out. He had no line that sucked. I get it. All these things are true. Guess what? I don't care. I don't want to make the excuse anymore. It's done. It's time to get rid of all excuses for DJ. Because even good quarterbacks, not even the great ones, not even the best of the best, overcome roster deficiencies and overcome coaching deficiencies up to a point. I'm not expecting Daniel Jones to go ahead and be a number 8 in the league quarterback this year. No way. But he has to overcome some adversity. He has to score fucking points, man. Like, there comes a point where you can say everything you want about injuries and bad coaching and all that stuff. Many quarterbacks across the league have bad coaching and roster injuries or bad rosters in general. And they find ways to put points on the board, man. The Dallas Cowboys had 40 more touchdowns than the Giants last year. That's unbelievable. That's insanity. And the Cowboys offense wasn't even cooking like we thought it could. We thought it could have been better. 40 more touchdowns. There's no more excuses. There has to be plays made. There has to be touchdowns scored. It's a must. I was at the preseason game on Sunday night with the Giants. Tyrod Taylor looked solid. Brandon Webb actually looked really good. Not that it matters, but whatever. Talking to a couple fans in the stadium. DJ looked okay. Yeah, he looked okay. Yeah, he looked okay. Yeah, it was fine. He did it. It's not enough. It's over for Daniel Jones unless you freaking score some points, man. All right, so that's the quarterback question. As otherwise for the Jets versus the Giants here, which coach do we feel more confident in after this year? Brian Daboll, Robert Saleh? Some could say it's the same question. It's not exactly. Saleh's more a defensive coach, LaFleur over there, OC for the Jets, whatever. But I think there's a chance Daboll can take this one, right? Because the offense with Daniel Jones or with Tyrod Taylor, if that becomes a thing at some point, if DJ gets hurt or he just loses the job at something, there's a reason to believe there'll be more aggression, there'll be more creativity, and there'll be more positive outcomes for the Giants offense. Even if you're not fully trusting Daniel Jones to be any sort of dude, you can trust him to do more this year than he did last year because of Brian Daboll. With the Jets, it comes down to their defense with Robert Saleh. Can that defense, which has some guys on it, who has a rookie corner who just got drafted real high, there's a chance they can be very good. I'm going to go with Daboll because it's going to be newer, because the win total for the Jets is not going to be anything special, even if they have a nice year. And I think the offense and all that stuff is going to rain a cloud on Saleh if the quarterback stuff is really bad and all that stuff. So I think Daboll can take that. And it comes down to the Giants, man. Can they have 1 year where they stay healthy? Can Kenny Golladay do anything positive as a wide receiver here? Can Kadarius Toney play like 10 games? 10? I'm not asking for 16, 17. I'm asking for 10. Kadarius Toney, man. Guy's crazy good. Crazy electric. But it don't matter until he does something about it, until he does it for more than 3 weeks in a year, right? So it's question marks, man. It's question marks. So I think all in all, if I'm going to say who's going to have the better season, the Jets or the Giants, I think the Giants end up with more wins just based off of schedule because they have the easiest one in the league, based off of Daniel Jones being, even if like Zach Wilson takes a step up, they're probably not that far off as far as like, top to bottom tiers. And also the divisions in which they play, they might just beat up on each other in the NFC East, and the Giants can sneak one on the Eagles, sneak one, maybe two on the Commanders, and have a chance to like sneak into 7 wins or something like that. Right. Whereas the Jets are going to probably lose twice to the Bills, at best split with the Patriots, at best split with the Dolphins. Like there's not a real path for them to take advantage of their division, and their schedule is much harder outside of Division 2. But I do think you can walk away from this 2022 season feeling better about the Jets, feeling better about their whole situation with their talent, playmakers, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Elijah Moore, all that fun stuff with the Jets. You can feel real good about it. Franklin Myers, Carl Lawson's back. CJ Mosley's going to be playing. Sauce Gardner, like I mentioned before. So I think there's a reason to feel good about the Jets, even if it doesn't mean wins. So that's it. That's my 5 big questions, y'all. NFL questions 2022. What a year. I'm super duper excited for this season, man. I just had a Sunday where I watched the whole Mets game basically, and it was like a ridiculous game because it was like a rain delay. It was the slowest moving game ever anyway. And I'm loving the Mets season. I'm having a great time watching them. They did lose to the Yankees on Monday night, as expected. Doubleheader Saturday. Long ass game on Sunday. Go play the Yankees on Monday. Tough one, right? So if they come back and win Tuesday, whatever. But Sunday, sitting on the couch and watching the Mets all day just made me yearn. I was feeling it, man. I was like, God damn, Scott Hansen, where are you? I need you, Scott. I need you. So I'm excited, man. It's soon. I got 5 fantasy drafts in 6 days coming up in a week here. 2 on one night, and then a couple of nights spread out after that. I'm just amped. Can't wait to gamble, talk to you about some picks. Going to do some more preview stuff before the season starts with Pat Boyle, amongst others. And it's always fun, man. Football season. What a time to be alive. Shout out to my buddies, my boys, Monsignor Farrell Football, heading up to their high school football camp next couple days. Get to work with some receivers, have some fun, see some nice high school football as they get ready for their season, as the fall is upon us. Yeah, Game of Thrones might be back with the House of Dragons. I might be doing my first ever watch through of Game of Thrones. But I don't care that winter is coming because fall comes first and football Sundays around the corner. And then we'll start talking about winter. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. I'm Pete Kennedy. This is Subway Sports Talk. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcast app, Spotify. or on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the notifications bell. And if you like what you've been hearing, man, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. I love getting the feedback. I love hearing your takes. So send it to me on Twitter or Instagram at Subway Sports Talk. And you know what to do. You're hearing me say these words. You can find me online. You can say what up. You can shout out whatever you want to shout out, and we'll have a nice conversation. Talk about some football, baseball, and more. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to y'all soon. Cheers.